So in this tutorial, I'm going to walk you guys through how to deliver stems, cut downs, alt mixes, all that good stuff for some of the opportunities that we're going to have in this group moving forward, particularly with our new distribution partner, the one that I'm calling Library X. They're going to want tracks delivered in this format, and I think most of you guys have your tracks mixed and mastered to the point where they're acceptable to me. And so we're going to start having you guys deliver a lot of the alt mixes and cut downs and bumpers and stingers and all that kind of stuff. So you guys basically are going to get some hands-on experience making sure that you deliver exactly what the client wants. I will obviously be reviewing everybody's tracks when you send them to me, and if I find an issue, I will send it back to you and tell you to fix it if it's not following our structures or our guidelines. But this video will basically walk you through the entire process, especially if you're using Logic Pro 10. There are some steps here that if you don't use Logic Pro, you need to look up how to make these steps happen. But basically, it's the same process for any DAW that you need to work with, okay? So for everything that we're going to deliver, the stems, the cut downs, all that stuff, we're going to be using wave format and 24-bit and 48K, okay? One more time, I'll repeat it. Wave format. I don't want AIFs. I don't want MP3s. Waves. 24-bit, right? The largest bit size, not 16-bit. And 48K, okay? Some of the other previous opportunities I've been asking for 44K. From now on, we're moving on to 48K. Definitely with this library and possibly with other stuff and other opportunities as well. But I think 48K is probably becoming more of the standard that we're going to be working with. So that's the format you're going to be bouncing everything in. Now, most of you guys know how to deliver stems. Just in case you don't, real quick, brief reminder. You first set your loop on the top, okay? And a lot of times what you want to do is give yourself just a little bit extra room than when the tracks actually start. So here I actually have these stems here from Gabriel. And obviously, as you can see, I've given myself, I'll zoom in a little bit more, just a little bit more than when the actual track starts. Not much, literally less than a beat here, okay? So you don't want to have it starting right here on the start of your tracks because maybe there's a compressor that needs to get engaged. Maybe there's a MIDI note that needs to be engaged. Sometimes you have to have a MIDI library engage your first hit or whatever. So just give your DAW just a second to breathe before you start your stems like that. And then, of course, you go all the way to the end of your track and make sure that it's nice and faded out, that you have no music playing at the end here. He gave me some pretty long stems. And yeah, there's really nothing going on there. So actually, even for me to be even cleaner on that, I would probably drag these over. I'd give them all probably a fade out. What I'll do is kind of go right here and let's put 5,000 there. That way we make sure that we have a nice clean fade out so that there's no audio playing by the time we get to this end right here. The other way you can do that is obviously by creating a master track through your master bus. With Logic, you can do this here, create a track, and there you go on the bottom. You make sure you have your display on. So if I wanted to see my volume, there I go. And I can actually just have my master volume just come down like that, right? So that way all of my tracks, no matter what, are going to be completely done by that point. So that's just one way to do it. I'm not going to do that for this opportunity, for this track here. But you just want to make sure that you don't have like a cymbal crash and then gets cut off. You want to make sure that everything's nice and smooth and you have complete silence when you're done with the stems. And then what you're going to go do is solo each one out that you need to bounce. Now, how do you group these together? You do need to put like simple things like kick, snare, maybe hi-hats and cymbals can be put together. Claps and snaps can maybe be put on the same one. Percussion can kind of be all put together. So if you have percussion, if you have a shaker and a tambourine, all that kind of stuff. So some things can be obviously grouped together. But if you have, let's say, like horns and strings, there needs to be a horn stem and a string stem. You need to separate things that are like are in their own instrument world. Okay, so if you have a piano, I don't want to have a stem that says piano and horns, right? Where you combine two things. Give me the piano, give me the horns, give everything. If it makes sense to have it separated, like it has its own voice in your track, you need to put it on its own stem. And then also you need to make sure that you give me all of your impacts and risers. Before we were calling those sound effects, I think we should start just labeling those impacts and risers. So your risers up, and then your crashes, impacts, booms, 808 drops, whatever you want to do. It's just kind of more sound effects stuff, but like rather than calling it sound effects, we're going to call it impacts and risers. If you have vocals, they need to be on their own track, because vocals, as we're going to show you in this tutorial, sometimes need to be taken out of mixes, and that'll be provided as an alt mix. Other times we need to keep them in there for the full mix, okay? So vocals don't need to be put on any other track with anything else. They need to be isolated by themselves. If you have leads, obviously a guitar lead or a synth lead or something like that, that needs to be in its own track, because obviously, as you guys know, you're gonna have to deliver versions sometimes that don't have that are like alt mixes, right? That are just like without leads, drum and bass, that kind of thing. So we're gonna make sure that we deliver all of those versions for people. So just a quick fresher reminder about stems, just making sure that you're keeping them nice and clean. They're all the same length. Remember, waves, 24-bit, 48K. Okay, with that out of the way, and what you're going to do is just label those at what they are. So the kick will just be called kick. You don't have to put your name on it. You don't have to put the track name on it. You can just call the hi-hats, the piano, whatever you want to do. Whatever the instrument is, just make sure you label that stem appropriately. That's how we're going to be labeling those things. So let's move on now to delivering our full versions, the alt mixes, and then eventually we'll go into cut downs, okay? So for the full versions, we're obviously going to keep our loop exactly where it was with the stems. We don't need to go further or whatever. It can all be exactly the same. But the first one we're going to bounce is obviously the full mix, right? Because we're just doing exact everything that's going to be included in the full mix. So this is how we're going to bounce it. We're going to make sure that, especially with Logic Pro here, that we go down to waves, right? Remember, we're doing waves, 24-bit, as you can see right here. We're not going to do 44K. We're going to do 48K. Now, if you've started your session in 48K, this will all automatically be enabled as 48K. If you didn't start in 48K, you're going to have to literally drag this down every time you bounce a stem. I know it's annoying. You got to do it, though. You got to make sure that you don't forget that. Every time you bounce a new stem or an alt mix or anything, this will probably automatically go back. It'll be on 44K, and I think this session was, so I'm going to have to do this every single time. So that's why next time when you start a new track, just start it in 48K. It seems to be where we're going with most of our opportunities, and it's going to keep your life simpler so you don't have to click and drop that down every single time. Keep it on interleaved, no dithering, no, what's it called? No normalizing, so everything just stays the same. And now we're ready to bounce, okay? So when we bounce, we're going to make sure, let's do it on this one. I'll create a new one. So with this file up here that I have, I'm actually going to create a new folder. Get a new folder here. So we're going to call this one, so actually we're going to put your first and last name and just the name of the track. So obviously we already have that here. So you would just put Gabriel Oberg, and we're going to call this Confetti Rain. That's how you're going to be delivering your folder that's going to have everything. We're going to put the stems in their own little folder, and I'll talk about that. But we're going to put all of our alt mixes, everything, and they're going to be appropriately labeled, cleanly labeled, and bounced exactly how we want them to be bounced, okay? So we're going to create a folder here. You got your first and last name. Great. Now we're going to be bouncing these things in the right place. This is how we're going to be labeling our tracks. So now that we're in our folder here, hopefully you can see that. So it's going to be just capitalize the name of your track. Now, if you have a word like of or the, like, you know, kill the pain, the doesn't necessarily need to be capitalized, or of doesn't necessarily need to be capitalized, but the major words do. Okay, so this one we have confetti rain, underscore in between each one of those words. And then we have an underscore, and then we're going to do parentheses, all capital letters for full, meaning full mix. Okay, this is everything in the mix. We're not muting anything. Nothing's being altered. This is completely how it's supposed to be. And then underscore your name, obviously capitalized properly, and an underscore in between your first and last name. Okay, so that's the format that we're going to be following. And we're going to do the same thing for our alt mixes and our 60 seconds and our 30 seconds, 15 second stingers. So we're doing all of this stuff, but we just want to make sure that we get this naming convention down. This is how our partner essentially wants us to be ingesting our tracks into their system, okay? So this is what you're going to do. You're going to label it this way, and once it's good to go, you're going to hit on bounce. So now we got our full version bounced. Just as a quick reminder, it is probably a good idea for you to get in the habit of going back and listening to maybe not the whole track of your bounce version, but at least kind of skimming through the track and making sure that it's got everything that you want. There's no big pops or clicks or something like that. Listening through all of them probably is a great idea, just to make sure you don't deliver me something that's not that great. And if I don't catch it and it goes on to their website, maybe their clients don't want to place it. So a lot of this, also the reason why I'm having you guys do a lot of this now is because you guys are now going to be taking ownership of the quality of your music and making sure that, like, when you pass these tracks on to me and I pass them on to them, it's really your mixes and your naming conventions and the attention to detail that you put that will basically set apart your track from the competition. Just making sure that it stands off the page, it's cut properly, mixed properly, all that good stuff. So that's what we're going to be doing moving forward, just to make sure you guys are doing that. Okay, so now we have our full version. Let's figure out how do we do our alt mixes. Now, basically, There are only going to really be probably three different alt mixes you're going to be delivering. Okay, sometimes there might be an opportunity to do more than that, but these are the three if you have vocals on your track. If you don't have vocals, it's pretty much just two that you're going to be delivering. Okay, we don't need tons and tons of alt mixes. If we need more of them, I'll let you guys know, but for now these three are essentially the only ones that you should worry about for the opportunities for Library X, essentially. So the first one is we're going to have no vocals. So if you did what I said to do, which is just keep your vocals on one track, you can literally just mute that vocal melody out and hit bounce again. Okay, getting used to actually getting your shortcut on bounce is really good. So for me, it's Command B for bounce in Logic Pro. Definitely you should get used to that, because if you're going to be bouncing tons and tons of stems and alt mixes, you're going to get tired of going up to file and hitting bounce. So remember, here we go. We're bouncing again, 24-bit wave. Those ones will now stay as I had left them before, but again, here we go. 44K is enabled, so we got to push it down to 48, okay? And everything else stays the same. Now here's the difference. Let me make sure I get my naming convention right. Yeah, so here's the only thing you're going to be changing. So everything else can stay the same. This is where your life gets really easy. You capitalize A, you put Alt, and then you do a hyphen, and then you're just going to call this capital no vocals. Capital of V too, so no vocals. That's pretty much it, okay? Everything else stays exactly the same. You don't have to retitle anything. So your life should be fairly simple, and all you're doing is changing one little bit of the metadata on the naming so they know which version this is. So here you go. You click on bounce. Now that one's going through. Of course, you should double check that. Just make sure that's good to go. And then next, what we're going to do is we're going to take out the leads. Okay, so this is also sometimes called the narrative version. So if you ever work with a library and they ask for a narrative version, this is how you would deliver on that. So what we're going to do is go through this mix and find out. And of course, the no leads section also does not include vocals. So you can keep the vocals muted, right? So we're kind of progressing on the alt mix that we just did. So the vocals would be part of the lead thing because they're kind of sticking out. So we're going to keep those vocals muted. But let's find out what the leads are in this track. So definitely the bells. I'm kind of listening for all that lead parts that would come out and really kind of get in the way. So bells are definitely gone. And I think this is the other one that kind of sounds like a little bit like the lead. Now this is a good example. So here for Gabriel, for moving forward, I mean, this one's going to be okay, but I would even with this one, because I kind of hear low synths playing and also some high synths playing in this big synth stem that Gabriel's delivered. So probably it would be better to separate those two out so that we actually could get rid of most of those high frequency ones if we want to deliver more of a sort of just lower kind of narrative mix that doesn't have a lot of the lead instruments. This one's not that bad though. I don't think those leads highs are that intense or that distracting. But now that we have this other arpeggio synth muted and the bells muted, we're going to mix again and we're going to bounce. So let's remember and pull it down to 48. And let's call this one, you guys can guess it probably, no leads. So there we go. We're going to bounce that one down. And then finally, again, that one is for all tracks. No leads should be a given on your tracks when you're delivering them to me, okay? So just make sure that you do separate out I mean, you're going to be obviously having full control of your mix. You're doing this from your session. But definitely get rid of leads or anything that basically takes the forefront of your focus. Typically, it's in the mid or high range. So, lead guitar, lead pianos, even sometimes string leads, horn leads, anything that's just kind of like right there in the forefront, that's the stuff that you want to mute out. So that we have mostly just the low kind of background or chord instruments that are playing there. So it's better for a vocal or a narrator or somebody speaking on camera to be able to be heard. And then lastly, we're going to do just drums and bass. Okay, so this one you do want to include your impacts and risers. So your sound effects do get included in this. But let's say we don't want piano and one shots. I don't remember if he has... Yeah, so that one's kind of more just the percussion. We don't want strings. We don't want guitar, and we definitely don't want the synth. So if we play on... There you go. So it's a much different feel than all the other tracks. Now, some of your tracks, maybe let's say you start with something that's not drums or bass. So you have like maybe 10 seconds of silence in the start of your track. It is at that point appropriate to pull your whole loop over. Okay, you do need to pull this thing all the way over to the point where the drums and bass start. Okay, so you don't want to have just 15 seconds of silence just because it matches the same length as all the other alt mixes. You want to make sure that the music can stand by itself. That was one of the big things that our library basically told us. Just make sure that every alt mix, stem, everything could stand alone. Sorry, not stems. Stems obviously can have a lot of silence in them, but all the alt mixes and cut downs need to stand alone as their own piece of music. So if there is a lot of silence beforehand, like you hit play here, and let's say you didn't hear anything for 10 seconds, then you would drag your thing over 10 seconds and start it right where the music actually starts, right, with your drums and bass version of this, okay? But we have music right from the start. We have this crash and it kind of gets started. So what we're going to do is we're going to bounce this thing. That's going to be 48. And we're going to call this, everything else the same. We capitalize D for drums, and you can use the ampersand symbol there, drums and bass. And there you go. And so that's all three of our alt mixes. So now we have our full, and then we have 3 alt mixes. And again, only if you have vocals would you have that no vocal version. If you don't have any vocals, then you really only have to have no leads and drum and bass. That's really all you got to worry about for this library. Okay, and so the last part that I want to go over with you on full mixes and stems is when you put your stems and you start bouncing them, what you want to do is create a new folder inside of your master folder. So here's where it would be, we're inside. Here's our main one that you created with your first and last name, hyphen your track name. And then for this folder, we're just going to capitalize it, stems. Simple, okay? And inside of this folder is where you're going to bounce me all of your stems, okay? So you're going to do bass, kick, snares. Again, if you have multiple snares, put them all together. Strings, horns, risers and impacts can be on the same one, et cetera, et cetera. You guys know how to do those kind of things. So these are all going to be, again, still 24-bit, 48K waves, but they're all going to be in the stems folder. That way they're nice and organized and I can kind of see them. And I can do a double check on those as well and make sure that they're good to go. These ones I do recommend. Obviously, you go through and listen to them. I've had a lot of students send me stems and they're just wrong. Like they're just the wrong set, the wrong instrument labeled, or it's just two things that weren't supposed to be combined were combined, or some sound. This is the most common thing. Like you bounce some strings and then suddenly a snare kind of comes through there somehow. So maybe you had like a shared reverb bus or something, and so there's other sounds happening on your stem. So you just got to make sure that you double check all that kind of stuff, okay? Because you got to remember, I do my best to quality control and quality check the stuff before I move it on, but you guys remember that I'm human too. And so if things can get by me, that means they're going into a catalog. Maybe they're wrong. Maybe the catalog doesn't even notice them. But the client, if they're looking at it, they're going to listen to it and they're going to go, we like this, but there's a snare sound here, so we can't really use it. So again, that's why it's really important for you guys to take ownership of the quality of the product that you're delivering on board, okay? So don't just rely on me to like, well, Jesse, I'll just catch everything. That's a bad policy to have. You should be quality control at your own factory here, okay? You should make sure that anything that goes out, anything you're going to zip up and send to me has been quality controlled, that you know for sure you stand by it. It's been labeled appropriately. It's cut exactly right, and everything is exactly what it's supposed to be. Now, what we're going to do is move on to our cut downs. And this part is much more, it's more complicated if you've never done this before. It's not that hard. I know that when you first hear this, you're going to think, what the hell? This is going to be so crazy. How are we going to do this? Trust me, I thought the same thing. I've actually never been asked to deliver cut downs this precisely. It's really not that bad once you get into it, okay? So now that we have our stems, let's pretend we had all those stems bouncing here. Now we have all of our full and alt mixes of the full mix right there. We're pretty much more than halfway done, okay? So now we can move on to doing some cut downs. Now, I'm going to show you how to do this with Logic Pro. If you're using Pro Tools, if you're using something else, I don't know exactly how to do that on all of the DAW. So this is a part that if you're not using Logic Pro, you will need to do a quick search on this. And I'm going to show you what you should search for, okay? So now that we're good and we've done all of our full mixes, step one is up here on the top, and I know all DAWs allow you to kind of change what you're looking at. In Logic, normally it's Beats and Project that's automatically default. It's selected. So what we're going to do is just drop that down 1 to Beats and Time. Now, what you're going to see here is you're going to see this little thing that has frames, but you won't probably see that because you haven't selected that in your preferences yet. But I've already done it, so I'm starting to see this little. You'll see hours, minutes, seconds, and now frames. Okay, you're probably seeing milliseconds right over here at the very end. Okay, so here, let's figure out how to get that. So step one is we're going to go to our Logic Pro 10 preferences. You just go up here to the drop-down menu, go to preferences, scroll down to display right here. Now, even if you go to general or whatever, you can still get to it. But if you want to go directly to this panel, you just go to display. This little preference pane will pop up. And right here, just display time as, and this is where it's probably going to be defaulted at the milliseconds for you, or maybe samples. One of those two is probably, and that's probably not sampled. I bet it's milliseconds. You probably have these milliseconds here. What you need to do is just drop this down from hours, minutes, seconds, milliseconds to SMPTE/EBU without subframes. You don't need the subframes. So that's the setting you want to do. That's all you have to do, okay? So that's step one. So make sure you go from whatever this was defaulted to SMPTE/EBU without subframe. This is going to give you the measuring formats that we need to make sure that we're bouncing our cut downs precisely. Step two is we go to our track. We go to recording settings down here, okay? This is a different settings panel. So once you have this pulled up, you're going to go to synchronization. You're going to make sure that your frame rate is set to 29.97. Sometimes it's defaulted at 25, sometimes it's 30. It could be all over the place. It depends on what kind of projects you've been working at, and maybe you've adjusted this for previous stuff. For these opportunities and for what we're going to be delivering, we're going to put this to 29.97, okay? Not 30, not 30D, not 29.97D. 29.97, okay? And that's it. Those are the two things you have to do other than making sure that you're seeing the right format up here. And now you got these beats in time. Now you have the hour, the minutes, the seconds, and the frames. And really all you're gonna have to worry about is looking at your minutes and your frames. That's really the two meters that we're gonna have to look for as we're creating our cut down. So now we do need to do a 60-second cut down, 30-second cut down, 15-second cut down, and then a sting. A sting is simply 5 seconds, maybe 6 seconds of just a little musical exclamation mark. Most of the time you can do this from the very end of your track. And typically you can do this for like the last part of your track is where you can kind of find that piece of music. So how do we go about creating these things? Well, let me show you the super simple way to do it. It's not always this simple. Sometimes with your music, you might have to do some manual adjusting and getting things exactly on point. But if you can do it this way, it's going to make your life so much easier, and it's really not that hard. So typically what I do is I start from the end of the track, and I want to find out, I zoom in here. What are we at reading wise for our meter at the very end of my bounce here? We're at 251. So if we want a 60-second cut down, typically I'm just going to go backwards 60 seconds. So 151, right, would be 60 seconds prior. So let's go back. So right around here, this is about 151. And let's see what's happening with the music. Let's see if we can find like a sort of natural place to get into our track at that point. We want to make sure that there's music playing. We don't want it to be like a piece of silence or maybe a buildup. We want there to be just something musical happening or right around there. Let's see if we can do that. So this little crash right here, I think it works. So it does have a bit of a slow energy, and it's going to be building up, but it definitely gets us right into, I like how this crash really just boom starts off the track and gets your attention. And this part is going to build up and basically build into this intense last chorus of the track. So this is where I'm going to start our 60-second cut down. Now, this is where I said sometimes it works great, sometimes it doesn't work great. Maybe you're like in the middle of a verse here, maybe you're in the middle of something. So you might have to adjust your track to make sure that it fits into a 60-second section of time, okay? So that's why some of it, most of the time though, when I was going through your guys' tracks, I think 99% of the time it worked. There were a couple of tracks I had to adjust some things around, but normally you can even find something that works for that 60-second area. Even if you have to push it forward, back, or go back in time a little bit or forward in time a little bit, just to get to the point where it's like a nice clean start right into some great music of your track, okay? So here we go. This is where we're going to be taking our track from. So this is the kind of impact right there. Now, this one, I don't think I'm on the grid because I don't have the BPM. I wasn't working with the BPM on this one. So this one I do have to sort of eyeball and then use my ears to make sure I get it right. You guys will obviously be on the grid and you will make sure that you're getting right on the one, right? You're going to be making sure that you do that. So I can see here that this one shot kind of starts right around there. So that's where we're going to be starting our 60-second cut down here. Now what you're going to do is you're going to grab all of this, right? Your whole track, your whole session here. You're going to hold down Option to copy it. I think most of the AWs have the same function. And you're going to drag it over, okay? You don't want to be making your mix on top of your full, and you want to basically create a whole new one over here. So we're going to create a new loop, and let's make sure we get that start just nice and clean before we even get to work on it. So it looks like we're a little bit late. So we're going to pull it back, everything back. We select it all, pull it back. It was right there. A little further. Maybe even right there. Now that start kind of sounds abrupt because like psh, you hear this kind of clicking sound. So what I do is with all of these, I'll actually go through and add probably a 1 or 2 fade in, really very small, nothing big. You get too big, watch what happens when I go like 100. It's like a soft intro, and I don't like that sort of softness to it. It's too gradual, so I'll go to 2 just so it doesn't have that click to it, but it does have that that sharp sort of start. And if it's not enough, I feel like it's still too harsh, I can go up a little bit more. Maybe I'll go to like 8. Let's see what that does. That sounds so much better now. Now we have this nice big boom impact, and we're going to start our track, okay? So now how do we make sure that we get exactly what they want? Now what they've been requesting for with these kind of cues, they want it to be exactly 60 seconds to the frame, okay? So that means that that's why we have to have these frames here. We can't just go 60 seconds. All right, cool, good enough, because there's 29 frame, or there's 30 frames, 29.97 frames in every single second of music. So if you have 60 seconds plus 20 frames, it's technically still 60 seconds on your WAV file, but it's way over the frame rate. So frames are dividing up our seconds. This is why we got to be very, very exact and very, very precise when we're mixing these things. So this is how we're going to make sure we do that. So the first thing we're going to do is, I'm going to extend this out so we can kind of get this more in the center of my my thing here. There we go. Okay. So we're going to get our loops section here on the top. And we're going to drag this all the way over to see this 141 or so. What is this showing us? So what you want to do is you basically want to start with the end of your 60 seconds. Now we've already sort of eyeballed the 60 seconds, right? Because we had, we went back in time 60 seconds from the end of our full track. So we normally want to start right, we want to end our track on one of the sort of whole bars here, right? So we don't want to end our track, let's say like right here, or in the middle. We want to find, like you see these numbers on the top, 130, these are the measure numbers. We want to basically end our track right on one of those. That's going to make sure that we stay right on grid and in those frames, okay? That's where the difference is between maybe just eyeballing 60 seconds and doing it precisely. And now that we have this measuring here, we can see exactly where we are. So if we actually put our cursor right on the end there, it says we are at 4:39:22. 22 is really what we need to be worried about, and also this 39. Okay, so now let's go back. If we go back 1 minute, what is this number going to be? It's still going to be 39 because that's the seconds, right? So it's now going to be 3:39. So that's going to stay 39. This needs to stay 22, right? So let's go back in time and find out where that would be. So if we go to 30, there's 39, there's 23. That's close enough. So what you want to do is be within basically 5 frames, okay, of that area. So if you start right here on this grid, and this is within 5 frames, you're good to go. Now you can, if you'd like to, get super close and say 22. Okay, so there's our 22. Now that's how we know this new section. See, it's 39:22, and at the end it was 39:22. But of course, that's 60 seconds. Now this is the loop that we need to fit our 60-second piece of music into. Okay, so now that we have our loop and we have the music here, obviously it doesn't fit. Look in the beginning. We're obviously starting before this loop. So what do? Well, we need to cut down the outro, or the last hit ending. As you can see on this side, we have a lot of blank space, okay? So what we're going to do is take all of these, And let's listen to it and see how it fades out. Okay, so it's got a nice hit out ending. So what we're gonna do is drag all these back. Let me put it right there, and we're gonna drag everything. Make sure we drag everything though. See, we have some of these things that were not captured. That would have been a problem. So we want to make sure we grab everything. And what we're trying to do is fit it within our already set guidelines here. So this thing on the top is basically where we need things to fit. It's like a puzzle essentially. And so now we have even more room. Let's see what we're doing on the left side. We've even got room over here. So it looks like we're good to go. So what we're gonna do is drag this over. Again, you can give yourself just a little bit of space before that loop starts. See how we're giving ourselves just a little bit of space, even like that. Maybe we want to give a little bit more. Let's see. There you go. And then what we can do is just make sure we give ourselves as much as we need to at the very end here. So we can drag this all the way. And again, I wouldn't go all the way to where your loop stops. I wouldn't do it like right to that point. But as you can see here, I'll zoom in. We've got a little bit of space between where the end of this starts and where the actual wave files stop. And of course, you want to give it a listen, make sure it sounds good. Of course, now these fade outs are way too intense. So what I'm going to do is just drag all of these and select them all. And now instead of 5,000, maybe I want to adjust this to 2,000. Maybe we want to do, let's do 2,700. Okay, let's see what this sounds like. Maybe even a little bit more. So let's do 3,500. So you got to kind of play with this and see what it sounds like. There you go. So you got to make sure it's completely out, all your fades. And you can do it with your master bus if you'd like to, all the way down here and fade it out again right at the very end. But I typically, it depends on what's going on with my stems. This one I have just stems, so I have complete control over the audio. If you're working with just audio, your fades will do just fine. But if you do have reverbs enabled and that kind of thing that are kind of bleeding on a little bit, that's where you can run into some kind of cutoff issues. So just make sure that you're good to go. So here we go, guys. So that was the 60-second. I know it's a little bit more intense and more detailed than all the other ones we've been doing, but it'll get easy. Trust me. The first time you do it, you might just struggle with it a little bit, but it gets easier as you do more of these. So what you're going to do is you're going to go to bounce. Okay, maybe make sure we drop it back down to 48, right? It's not going to automatically do that. Now, the only thing you're going to change is you're going to get rid of all this alt drum and bass stuff, and you're just literally going to type in 60. That's it. Make sure you still have your parenthesis there. Everything else stays the same. So it's not like a big ordeal to have to label these things. And now we bounce. Now, if you have vocals in any of your tracks, you will need to create an alt version of your 60-second without the lead. So this one. Now, this is a good point. Now, I just listened to this, and there is a click thing happening there, which I don't like. So what I'm going to do is actually rebounce that 60 seconds without any of that in the beginning. So this is the kind of stuff why it's important to listen to your mixes, because there you go. So yeah, I would rebounce that one. So that now when you find issues like that, all you have to do is just simply rebounce it and replace it. Okay, so you make sure it's 48 again. Hit that. Now we're still in 60. It's going to ask you, do you want to replace it? Yep. So that's the kind of stuff you got to be checking for, because sometimes when you cut things off, especially audio files, MIDI files, you never know. Things get kind of funky when you're making alt mixes or whatever. So that can definitely be an issue for you moving forward. So what I would then do is mute out all these vocals, right? Because this is kind of our vocal melody. And I'm going to create an alt version of the 60-second mix, dropping it down to 48K, of course. I want to put this one as, let me see how I label these things. 1 second. Excuse me. Alt. Let's see if I can get that one. Let me find one that has an alt. Hold on 1 second. Yeah, it's just 60 underscore alt. Okay. So this is all we're gonna do is you can not underscore. You can actually do this. Actually no. Yeah, we want to do underscore. So capital A alt for that kind of thing. So that's only if you have vocals though, okay? We're not doing no leads, we're not doing drum and bass, none of that kind of stuff, only for vocals, because sometimes when they want to use your music but they just don't want any vocals at all, they'll say, hey, give us that again, but we just don't want the vocals. So just make sure if you do have vocals in your track, you have to provide this separate alt mix of pretty much everything, 60, 30, 15, and sting. It might be more work, but again, you're giving them more options and increasing your chances of getting placements. Okay, so now we can actually unmute everything. So now we have our full 60 seconds. Now let's go down to 30. Now what would our 30 second be? Okay, You can keep all this as is. You can, let's see. I mean, the other thing you can do in the beginning, maybe what I would recommend is that you copy and paste all this stuff, because if I have a problem with your 60-second mix, you don't have to go redo everything. So in the beginning, this is what you're going to do is probably just, we'll do that now just in case. You're going to copy and paste all this stuff over and make sure that you start again. So you're going to do, let me get more of this space. Because now now if you need to go back to your 60-second mix, you've got this one. It's already between the markers. You can all make it again. If there's an issue, you can do it right away. And this one we can now create as our 30-second version. So again, we are in between these two. Looks like we're already in between the two markers. Maybe we're a little bit. Yeah, looks like we're kind of falling out a little bit. So what I'm going to do is just drag all these things so that we're actually completely inside of all this stuff. So it would be something like that. What does it look like on the other side? There we are. Okay, so now we're basically, yeah, we're completely in both sides. Now let's just make sure it's the same loop area though. So basically this would be, here we go. Remember the seconds and frames. So we're at 321 at the very beginning. That means we should be at 319 at the end. So again, within 5 frames. That's basically the rule. Just make sure you're within 5 frames of the starting one. But 321 would be the exact setting. So hopefully that's making sense for you guys. So now you guys can guess what are we going to do. Okay, we're going to do the 30-second one. Now we just need to go back 30 seconds. So what's 30 seconds before 3 seconds? Well, that would be 33 seconds, okay? So you got to go back in time. This requires a little bit of math. You got to go back to grade school a little bit, but if you go back 30 seconds, you're going to be at 33. Now remember we were at 33:19. So 3:19, sorry. So we need to go 33:19. So 33:20 again, within the 5 frames is good. So let's see what's going on in our track around here and see if we can find a good place to get in. Okay, so you hear that downbeat. That's where I typically, that's what I'm looking for, is I want a downbeat. I don't want to start in the middle of a session or in the middle of a progression. I want to start right on the downbeat. So let's find out where that is. And typically what you can do is just find your kick, and the kick is right here. So as you can see, this is our kick for that part. You can literally just start right in the front of it. You might have to do some finessing because I don't have the BPM here. And you can actually mute out. Grab all this stuff, mute it out. You don't need it for this version. You grab all these and probably want to do again maybe a two fade right here over, and just make sure that that's good to go. You don't need all of this, I guess. Yeah. So it looks like, is this the 30? Yeah. So okay, let's make sure we get our, now the same thing as we did with our 60. So let's make sure we get our actual frames down. So 319, so we're looking for 3319, 3320, that's about it. So what we want to do is maybe put our marker there. It's right on that downbeat. And here we go. So the difference is, again, as you can see, we're a little bit outside of the 30. So we need to make sure we fit it. So what are we going to do? Well, you always go to the end. Basically, you're going to have to start cutting your outro a little shorter every time this has to be done. And of course, now maybe 3,500 is too much. So we put this at, let's say 1,500. So it might be a real quick ending, and drag all this so it fits inside of there. And again, you don't want to have it right on it, but pretty close to it. It's okay. And then we got more room, so actually we can drag this back, let it breathe a little bit more. Now maybe we can do, let's say 3,000. Yeah, that's about right. Let's see what that sounds like. There you go. Nice clean ending, or intro too. So here we go. That's it. See, as you go forward, you get faster and faster to this thing. So now we can bounce this out. And again, this is our full version because we have our vocal included there. And we're actually just going to call this one, you can probably guess, 30. Super simple, right? And of course, with the vocals, got to mute those out. And we're going to create our alt mix. So you literally, that's why I keep the vocals on their own channel or their own little area, so you can find them quickly and label your tracks appropriately. Save you a lot of time. Again, we're going to do underscore capital A for alt. And there we go. There you go, guys. And then we have just 2 more to go. We have just our 15 and our sting. So as you can guess, what do we do with 15? This one, I'm actually just going to do this right on this one. This is normally how I do it because for the most part, I get these things right the first time that I do them. So what I can do is now remember we had 3:19. So what's 15 seconds before that? Sometimes it's hard for me to go. So I know I go in 10 seconds back, which would be 53. And then what's 5 seconds back? It's going to be 48. Okay. This is where it's a little bit tricky, but 48, what was the frame rate? 48:19, right? That's what we're looking for. 48. And actually, you'll find that, once you find it, you're like, okay, that's basically right down the middle. That's the other way. It's just kind of eyeball where the middle of your whole track is right here. And that's about where you're going to be looking for your intro point. So let's see what's going on here. So this one's tricky because it's kind of in the middle of a progression. So let's see what we can do about this. So I think what I'm going to do is just start with this chord that plays right here. And we want to make sure we include our vocals. This is the stuff where you got to pay attention, even me. So I think we want to start with this downbeat right here, right there. So this kick typically, this is where I'm looking for my little in point. So I'm going to take that kick, and that's where we're going to start this one. Sometimes it's nice and clean, and you can start it right on the downbeat. Oops, this is why you got to make sure you have everything selected. Other times, yep, make sure you get the right one. You can zoom in here, grab it right before that. There you go. You just want to make sure you get the start of that. Again, when you have the BPM, it's and you're on the grid, it's a lot easier to do that. Mute out what you don't need. Let's see what it sounds like. Okay, we'll do another. Let's do 2 fade in. Okay, so I lost my loop here, so let's make sure we get that back. So that was 3:19. We're gonna do 48:19. So 48:19, 48:20. That's about it right there. We're within that 5 frame difference there. And so, of course, we can drag everything back. The other thing you can do at this point, if you wanted to maybe start with a drum fill or something like that, definitely could do that. Dun, 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 boom, that kind of thing. Also, you could just start like this way, just getting the music started as natural as you can possibly get it. Obviously, we're not right on the downbeat, but at least we have the kick playing the downbeat there and getting us into it. So we can drop this out a little bit. We can even increase this probably to let's say 3200. And let's see what this sounds like. Perfect, there we go. And that's our 15, guys. So again, this is our full version. So we just want to call this one 15. And we're gonna mute out our vocals, and you guys know what comes next. It's Alt. Capital A, Alt, make sure that's all good to go. All right, and then finally it's our sting. So let's see what we do for the sting. Sting is basically, again, just, this one doesn't matter. There's really, you don't have to worry about this, the frames or anything like this. This is just like however long the sting is however long it is. So this one's a little bit easier to bounce out. So what you can do is just basically find the end of your track and see a natural place where you could maybe create a sting. Also, you do want to probably give it as much fade out as possible, since you don't. It's a little more forgiving for this one. I'll probably put this back up to 5,000, and now we have a nice long fade out. So I basically will start it at the start of this this whole section here. So right when that sort of buildup hits, right there, that's basically where I think this sting is perfect, because it's just literally just like, imagine they're going to put a piece of music just to get you out into the commercial spot or something like that. So it's literally just like a couple of seconds of music, nothing. So you mute everything you don't need, give it maybe a 2 fade in, maybe 1, maybe more, it just depends. You got to listen to it. And there you go. That's all we really need for our sting. So we're going to give it just a, just a split of lead time. There you go. And once it's out, it's out. Again, if you had a cool drum fill before here, let me see what the drums are doing. I know the drums are... Yeah, not much of a drum fill here. It is another thing that you could do to make your sting more attractive is to throw a drum fill before it, just dun, you know, right before it happens. So it's not a mandatory thing, but it definitely adds to the value of it. So it's one of those things where you can do that, and that's why it's important for you guys to start delivering these things, because nobody's gonna sell your music like you are. Okay, so I can do my best to make sure that these are marketable and licensable and all that kind of stuff, but you guys are the ones. It's like your writer share that's on the line here. Okay, so you guys have the most incentive to make sure that these things are shining and sparkling as much as they possibly can. So we make sure we bounce this out. We like how it is, and then we go capital S and sting, and that's it. And so now we've got a full range of tracks. Let me just pull up the actual folder here so you guys can see what the final one looks like. Let me get the EDM Sports. This was Confetti Rain. Okay, cool. So you can see this one. So we obviously have his properly labeled folder here. We've got all of our fulls, stings, alts, all that good stuff. We've got stems. We didn't bounce those, but those should be in there. And then this is the part where you basically want to go through and make sure that everything is good to go, you know. Again, just making sure that, yeah, that one had the vocals, the other one didn't. You know, just making sure you bounce things how you're supposed to. And of course, that's where you need to go through and do that. So once you have all of those good to go, you double check them, they're labeled properly, you know, you make sure that they're all exactly how you wanted them to be. That's when you would just go through on your master folder up here and compress it, zip it, whatever you're using. If you're Mac or PC, there's different ways to do it. Just make sure it's in one folder, and that's the one you can either upload to like Dropbox or WeTransfer or Google Drive, however it is you want to get it to me, but that should all be in one folder. So all this stuff is nicely labeled, and of course, as you can see, it's all just beautifully put together already, so I know exactly what everything is. The stems can be labeled just what they're supposed to be, and so it's all nice and clean. So I know this is a little bit more work than you guys have been doing in this group for this entire time, and kind of letting you guys get away with a lot of stuff by not requiring you guys to deliver this stuff. But this is definitely a time for you guys to get comfortable with delivering stuff this way. You will be required to deliver things occasionally, even down to the exact frame rate, which is why it's really important that you guys get good at this right now. And again, the main reason is because you guys need to do the best selling of your tracks and the best quality control for your music, okay? I've been doing a lot of the mixing and mastering and delivering all that kind of stuff, but I think a lot of you guys you're stepping up your productions to the point where I don't really necessarily need to be doing that anymore. I think a lot of your mixes are there, so I decided this is probably just going to be the best way to move forward to make sure that you guys are getting the full experience. It's going to make make my life a lot easier, obviously. I don't have to go through all these kind of things, and obviously I think it's just a really good experience for you guys to get used to doing as well. So if you have any questions, post them below this video. I will always refer back to this video whenever we have an opportunity, just to let any of you guys know that maybe are brand new to submitting to these opportunities, to let you know how to do this kind of stuff. The other sort of tutorial that I will provide is how to insert the metadata, which there'll be a Excel sheet that you can fill out some certain important information for how to do that. Again, really important stuff that you guys need to learn how to do, and make sure you do it right. It's the only way to ensure that you're really selling your music the best way you possibly can, so that it doesn't just sit on the shelf and not get placed. So this is really important training and information for you guys to get your hands on. So I'll put up there's another training video that I'll put up for that one, so you'll have access to that as well.